Hello and welcome to the Holistic Living interview series. My name is Michelle Rusk and I am your host. And today we are welcoming Dr. Berkson. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Berkson.
Hi there.
So just a quick little synopsis. They're my 11-month-old. She's saying hi too.
She did. She said hi. I love it. She literally said hi. She's so precocious. That's fabulous.
So Dr. Berkson has been in practice in functional medicine, nutrition, hormones, intimacy with an emphasis on digestion for decades. As I get her, she obviously wants to be in the picture as well. She is considered one of the early thought leaders of natural medicine, training many doctors in the science and behind natural answers. She was a scholar at a hormone think tank at Tulane and has published original research with the University of Texas Medical School at Houston. She is a research fellow with the Health Science Collegium and a professor for higher board certification programs. She hosts Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio and writes the Berkson blog. So Dr. Berkson has a Best Health Radio show, and she engages agile thinkers like the co-architect of the Obamacare Act to let you in on fascinating and agile conversations. So let's have one of those today while I stretch and do all this stuff as a mom would do. My goodness. So, Dr. Berkson, tell us a little bit. I always like to begin with a little just kind of background and story on our speakers. So what really got you into naturopathy and holistic medicine?
Okay, I'm going to try and be short because we don't have that much time, so I could go on about my own personal story for 3 days, and I don't want to do that.
Okay.
But I'll just suffice it to say that most people get on the path of cleaning up their act by having the consequences of having gotten ill because their act wasn't cleaned up. Almost every conference you go to, people get a diagnosis, and based on that, they see the functional medicine light. They change their diet, they change their lifestyle, and often they get improved. Not always, because not anything works 100% for everyone. We're all trying to be the best we can, and we do the best we can. And we hope that we move through whatever shows up on our plate more elegantly. But it doesn't mean that we judge those who don't change and get ill because we say that's why they got ill, because life is a huge tapestry. Right. But I was early on doing everything right. My mother was a major athlete, so I've been working out my whole life. Everyone that knows me knows I've been an athlete all my life. And I heard a lecture on You Are What You Eat when I was 16, and I started eating organically, raising my own Nubian goats, raising my own food my whole life, yet I was ill my whole life. So I was doing everything right and getting the wrong answers. And you can go to my website to hear more of the story. I'm not going to belabor it. But getting ill often is a perfect storm of a number of factors that converge. And to really get well and not just be maintained with helplessness on medications for life or procedures, you have to figure out why you got unwell and how to reverse it. So it turned out through a long story that my mother had been given a drug when she was pregnant with me, and it was given like a prenatal vitamin. It was given to millions of women for 36 years by well-intentioned gynecologists saying, this is the newest and best prenatal vitamin that we have. And it was given to millions of women. That's why you can never trust everything that anybody says, because what is the trend of the time doesn't mean it's not going to be proven to be bad down the road. So you've got to really tune into how you feel. So my mother was, as all women were in that era, a good patient. And she took this medication, which was 36 years later, labeled by the FDA as a class 1 carcinogen.
Oh my goodness.
And the majority of the daughters born to those women developed breast cancer, multiple cancers, and couldn't have children. That's why I have 21 books out, because my books are my children. So by the time I finally figured out that that was the cause of my illness, this exposure in the womb to this most endocrine disrupting compound ever invented, I had already had 15 major surgeries, lost 7.5 organs, and multiple doctors, well-intentioned, just like the doctors who gave my mother the script for the prenatal vitamin when she was pregnant with me, said to me, "You're never, ever going to be well again. Never. You've lost a kidney, an adrenal gland, half your thyroid. You've lost all these organs, and you're just, if life is a book, you are in the last chapter of your book. And you have to learn how to age gracefully or you're never going to be happy." Now, what I have learned beyond a doubt is that there is always a yes behind every no. And when a doctor tells you with all good intention that there's nothing left that can be done for you, it means there's nothing left that they know that can be done for you. That's all that means. That's all that means.
Right.
So my whole life journey, now that I have absolute unstoppable wellness and energy, and I'm older than all of those doctors who gave me all of those negative diagnoses, and I have more energy than any of them. I do dance marathon weekends. I just took all the young boys in my cul-de-sac a few days ago, kayaking for hours on the lake, even though it was moist and raining out. When the rain really came down, 2 hours later, we left.
Oh my gosh.
And I have 3 more books coming out soon. I teach, I lecture, I have a lot of energy, and I feel the way we would all love to feel. I have unstoppable energy. And life is one planet when you have energy. It's a whole nother life. And it's a totally different kind of life when you have no energy.
Yes.
And no one can tell you why. So I wrote one of the very first books on the concept that our outer environment is gaining entry into us and sabotaging us. And that's called endocrine disrupting compounds, metabolism disrupting compounds, hormone mimics, estrogen mimics. I wrote one of the very first books, and based on that book, I was invited to be a scholar at a think tank at Tulane Med School and University, working with all the doctors that were understanding how the outer environment is messing up our hormones. And we have a whole nother understanding of hormones, that they're not just about sexy things and reproductive things, but they run the show. Right. They run the whole show of our health. So hormone altering chemicals in your air, food, and water are a real problem because they can be hijacking and assaulting your entire health. And that was what my mother was given as a drug, as a prenatal vitamin. It was the most endocrine disrupting, estrogen disrupting compound ever invented by man. And the physician that invented it, Sir Charles Dobbs, also invented plastics, carbonates and phthalates. So all of the molecular structures that he loved were estrogenic in nature. And that's why a lot of the compounds that come out of plastics are estrogenic, but there's many other compounds now that are attacking oxytocin, attacking androgens, testosterone. It's not just estrogen that's being futzed with. But it just so happened, as I was writing one of the very first books on this phenomena, I discovered that that was the issue why I was so ill, was that I was exposed to the most powerful one ever invented, which has become the model compound to test plastics and perfumes and personal care products against the drug my mother was given as a prenatal vitamin, and see if it acts like that, to see if it's disruptive to your hormones. So anyway, hormones run everything. Like, for example, they run your microbiome. So your microbiome is a teeming life force of bacteria, fungus, and viruses inside our large intestine. But we mainly know about the bacteria. Like, that's why we take probiotics are so popular now. They're good bacteria. But there's more viruses in our gut than bacteria. There's more good fungi, but we don't know those yet. Those are the tip of the iceberg. Wow. But what we do know, based on my working, for example, with one of the scientists I worked with at, and have continued, he's been a consultant for my last book, is Michael E. Baker. And he is a scientist at the University of California in San Diego. And he's done all this research to show that your microbiome is paralyzed by endocrine disrupting compounds. So when you go into your bathroom in the morning and spray hairspray on and put makeup on, or use regular detergent in your washing machine, you are exposing yourself to all of these compounds that disrupt your microbiome, paralyze it. And then your immune system, which mostly lives in your gut, doesn't work as well. Last year, a study came out of a number of health sciences and veterinary medicine groups in 2017 where they took healthy dogs. A lot of our information in the environment first comes from animals, not all of it. We first learned about endocrine disruption by the animals that were being altered in their sexes. So that's how we first learned about all this, was from animals. And they fed healthy dogs canned dog food, because all cans have a lining of an endocrine disrupting compound called bisphenol A. Even the canned bubbly water that you get, and the good healthy colas that you get, and even the canned tuna and the canned dog food. And they were able to show that within 2 weeks of just feeding these dogs canned food that made their bisphenol A levels elevate to the same amount that human beings have from consuming organic garbanzo beans from Whole Foods in a can that has that lining in it. It's a plastic kind of lining, that their microbiome was altered and damaged.
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Most of the damage that occurs from hormones is in 2 to 6 weeks. A study came out in the pharmaceutical journal, the Journal of Pharmaceutical Medicine from Pakistan last year also. And many people are giving up red meat in that country, so they're eating more chicken. So some forward-thinking researchers thought, well, if they're eating more chicken, the chicken growers are responding by feeding growth promoters, at least in Pakistan. I don't know if that overlays to what we're doing here in the United States, but it's the point of the speed. Why don't we see what's happening to the hormones of the people who eat the chickens that grow faster? So a normal chicken takes 3 months to become from a baby to a size where you can kill it for human food. But now in Pakistan, the chickens were maturing in half that time. So they were maturing in 1.5 months. So these pharmacists took a look at hormones in rodents that were fed either regular rat chow, or they were fed the chicken that had been fed the food to make it grow faster, or they had been fed organic chicken. And they took a look at the effects, and they found that rodents consuming chickens that had been fed growth enhancers, which are even used illegally often if they're not legal in America, but we don't know exactly what goes into all of our food. But what happened is that progesterone in 6 weeks was completely prevented from being produced. It was a progestin disruptor, and infertility occurred, PCOS type blood patterns occurred, hormones went all over the place. In fact, the title of the article was How Eating Non-Organic Chicken Leads to the Development of PCOS, Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, which is an epidemic in the United States in teenage girls today.
Yes.
So the bottom line, and there's article after article, there's an article that came out that regular detergents, which have nonylphenol in them, if you take in probiotics and you take a pill of lactobacillus and lactobacillus acidophilus, bifidus, it blocks it. You can't even use it. So you're spending money to take a probiotic, but you're using a regular house detergent in your clothes or your washing machine for your dishes. All those things. So when I was a scholar at Tulane, one of the more dramatic moments, we had like 33 years of seminars that were given. I was there for about 18 years of them, I think, attending them. And they were first called Estrogens in the Environment, and the last 6 or 7 were called hormone conferences. And the last few sounded naturopathic because hormones have so much to do with nutrition. They lean on nutrition, which leans on digestion, but it's all paralyzed by exposure to hormone-altering chemicals in our air, food, and water. So there was this fertility specialist, a scientist, and she was able to show that if you take plastic containers and put them in a regular dishwasher and clean them with a regular harsh detergent, the harsh detergent creates micro tears that you can't see with your eye that liberate estrogenic chemicals. And then if you even put water, so she took little teeny plastic containers, Tupperware type containers, cleaned it in the dishwasher, put water in it, just water, nothing acidic, not like berry juice, and fed a generation of rats that water, and then those rats became infertile, almost 100%. And then the rats born to them that weren't even exposed to the estrogenic compounds from the water in the containers, they also had a high degree, not 100%, but of infertility. So part of the issue that's been now proven by independent laboratories around the world is that hormone altering chemicals can futz with our hormones. It doesn't affect every single person, but it certainly is effective, especially if you are pregnant or before you get pregnant, affects the egg and the sperm. And it certainly is very, very effective while the brain is developing, especially the first 3 years and all the way up for the first 18 or 19 years. And then it affects the other end of life. Our senior citizens are really vulnerable because they have less protective mechanisms.
Right.
So it's transgenerational, that exposures to one generation then leave a legacy of endocrine disruption to the other generations. And this has been shown in DES daughters. Very few, but a few of the DES granddaughters developed ovarian cancer at 9, 10, and 11 years of age.
Oh my
If
God.
I would have been able to have a daughter, my daughter would have had a risk of having a severe endocrine disrupting disease, like a hormonally driven illness like ovarian cancer. So many countries now are saying, and the same Harvard and the Huffington Post began a series of public forums supporting this, that we've all thought that the number one threat to humanity is nuclear war. That would ruin the human race. And the second there's a debate about is global warming. But the third is now hormone altering chemicals. They are affecting fertility, they are affecting brain, they are affecting if your kid has impulsivity, anger control issues, they are affecting a massive amount of things. So you as a parent just need to figure out, without getting stressed to the max and doomsday, how do you go about step by step limiting your family's exposure to these hormone altering chemicals. And there are a lot of things you can do. I wrote an entire book on this called Hormone Deception. And I came out with an edition in 2016, and it has a room by room tour of your home, your supermarket cart, how to reduce exposure. But I'm going to give you some hints today. Now, of course, the planet is dirty.
Yeah.
And when a lot of these toxins bioaccumulate up into the air, they are carried in mini whirlwinds that can traverse the outer layers of the earth for 30 years, dropping toxic material as they move around the planet. So as Bucky Fuller, no one in your audience is going to remember him, but he was a philosopher like Carl Sagan. He said, we're Earth, spaceship Earth. We're one planet hurling through space, and everything affects everybody else. And your garbage affects another country, and their garbage affects you. But there are things that you can do. So the very first thing is air, because air is 24/7, and food is a few times a day, water's a few times a day, but air is the big deal. So particulate matter and dirty endocrine disrupting chemicals and things in air are being linked to behavioral issues, to dementia in older people, to lung, not just asthmatic and lung issues. So your air is everything, everything. The doctor of the future will be an environmentally oriented person somewhat, and will really address what's going on in your home and your air. I have a radio show that I did with a guy named the Pure Air Doctor, and he's invented and launched this month a new set of machines where two things are put in your home, and they can measure hundreds of volatile organic pollutants. They can measure gas being outgassed from mold in your wall. They can tell you exactly what's going on in your air, because your dirtiest little bad pocket of air in your attic or under a sink is seeding your air in your home. So one, you want to make sure that your air isn't dirty, get it tested, and have really high quality air filters. You can buy them online. Most of my patients get them on Craigslist. They're called IQ air filters. That's the one that my environmental mentor uses, IQ Air. And you can put one upstairs, or if you have a one-story home, 1,700 square feet, you can just use one. And then you can get little ultraviolet lights and different things that cost you per furnace about $500 and maybe $100 to get it put in. And they clean out the ducts where mold breeds and dust and mite breeds, and they're always in there. They only have to be changed every 2 or 3 years. Oh, wow. And you have your ducts cleaned out. Now, that's kind of like having all your ducks in a row. So your air is everything, and it's better to live further than a half a mile away from a major highway. Living within a half a mile from a major highway, you're going to have a lot of more dirty air in your home. And then you've either got to move if you've got an ill child,
Yes.
or you've got to just put a lot of air filters, because you can really clean your air. You've got control over it.
And I want to just touch on that really quick, if I may, share a quick story. My daughter, who is 8 now, about 2 years ago, we've been in this house for a while, but we noticed that she was coughing. And I was pregnant. And I walked into her room one day and I took a deep breath and I looked at my husband and I said, something's wrong. I said, she's coughing, and it was almost like a light musty smell that I couldn't put my finger on.
Musty smell usually means mold.
Yes. And my husband immediately went upstairs. We actually had her air tested. The guy said, you know what? I'm not seeing any, like nothing's coming back on the mold spores, but I still had my husband. I said, go into the attic. I want her duct changed. Like, it was just my intuition, because they were old duct work. And our duct work is in the attic. He changed it. It's all brand new, and her coughing stopped. So I think that inside of there, and he did say that there was a little bit, because they condensate. So when in the summer, when it's hot outside, and then you have the air conditioning running. So yeah, he actually said, I saw a little bit of condensation on the inside that looked like it had just been sitting there. And my guess is there were mold spores in there.
Well, see, this is a problem, though, with the guys that only test for mold spores. So they're limited by looking at the spores, and the new technology can pick up gas. You don't even need to see the spores. They pick up gas in the air that's even given off by mold inside your wall. And if you go to pureairdoctor.com, and I'm going to have to give you, if you go in through my number, because that's what I'm doing in my own home now, he'll give you all kinds of discounts and make it for much less. He just has invented this, and I had him on my show because he'd been on other mold shows and he'd been so articulate, and he can pick up gases put out by molds that you don't even have to pick up the spores, and it goes beyond what testing is available up till now. And if you have crawl spaces under your home, those need to be tested. So we've never realized how important air is. So we're getting the memo on food. We're getting the memo on exercise, but we haven't really gotten the memo on air, because we think, well, what do I do about that? But there's a lot to be done about that. Like just putting a $50 Berkey shower filter on your shower will eliminate a lot of cancerous substances going in your home air, because you inhale more water a day than you drink.
Right.
And your shower, your washing machine, and your dishwasher are all aerosolizing water up into the air. And there are organic materials that, when they're moved going through the pipes, create trihalomethanes that are carcinogens. But if you put a shower, $50 Berkey, Berkey shower filter on your shower, you eliminate those trihalomethanes. Ideally is a whole house filter.
Yes.
When I was writing the book Hormone Deception, I came up with that idea, and I worked with a Santa Fe water company when I was living in New Mexico, and we developed one of the full water filters, and they were expensive, but now you can get them almost anywhere for $500, $600, $700 and get all the water in your home filtered, and they only need to be changed about every 2-3 years. This is something that is a major thing to do to protect your family, your kid's brain, your own brain, and your gut microbiome to not be paralyzed. So you end up having immunity issues, and you go to the doctor being given meds or diagnoses. I mean, they're now saying that the health of your gut microbiome has everything to do with exposure to hormone altering chemicals. And when they're dysregulated, you're much higher risk of diseases like diabetes, cancer. And there you get a diabetes, and you're running after the results of the exposure. You're on the meds, you're like being on the, an insulin pump, you're looking at everything going on, but that's really the result of a root cause of why you got ill. And in some cases, you could reverse all that all the way back and get rid of the cause and get the person well. In some cases, you can just get them improved.
Right.
Not every case can be reversed, but air has so much to do with everything. And the other thing that people don't realize is you want to eat your microbiome health comes down to your food,
Yeah.
and the more diverse and really you want to eat very different foods. We tend to eat the same foods over and over again, and a monotonous diet will make a less well microbiome. And so the more you go to Asian restaurants and buy some things at different Asian and Taiwanese, you go to these different types of places and you get mushrooms and you get sauces, and that you are exposed to different fermented foods or all kinds of variations of fermented foods and different kefirs and things. Those kind of things really help you make a much healthier microbiome. But we now know that our microbiomes crosstalk. So you have microbiomes or teeming life inside your nasal cavity, your oral cavity, inside your breast.
I'm so sorry.
So you even have a biome in your breast. And
Yeah.
women who have breast cancer tend to get an unhealthy biome. So all your biomes crosstalk. So there's a lot of things that you can do to just keep these healthier. For example, after you floss, brushing your teeth should be non-negotiable. Flossing your teeth should be really important. And then after you floss, use some xylitol. You can chew on an eighth of a teaspoon of xylitol, but it helps kill bad bugs in your mouth and promote the flourishing of good bugs. And you swallow all day long and feed a lot of what's going on in your small intestine and large intestine microbiome with what's in your mouth. Women on birth control pills classically have altered oral microbiomes.
Yeah.
Because the birth control pills are made up of synthetic hormones that are used in the laboratory as controls for hormone altering experiments. So when they want to test if a new plastic is a hormone altering plastic, they'll compare it to the estrogen ethinyl estradiol in a birth control pill.
Oh my goodness.
Birth control pills are endocrine disruptors, and
Yeah.
they're very damaging to the gut wall. And if you have a young daughter, you're going to want to figure out some other way to give her birth control, or the mechanical IUD that doesn't have any hormone added to it. But that is a huge contribution to illness in young women, because birth control pills, the oral contraceptives, and the medications used in the IUDs, et cetera, and the shots are all endocrine disrupting compounds big time.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's like a big thing, is to sit down with your daughter, who's, if you want to be sexually active, how are we going to go about this while we protect your health and literally protect the health of your children and grandchildren?
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. And as my mom, I actually grew up with a very forward thinking mom. I feel very blessed, because one of the things that she always said to me was, don't do birth control. She said, because she said that they are terrible for you. And, we can talk about other things if you want to be sexually active. She said, but do not do birth control. And I did it for literally for 1 month, because I suffered when I was in high school from pretty bad ovarian cysts. And my gynecologist put me on birth control. And in 1 month, I had to get off, because oh my gosh, I felt like a completely different person. And then they were trying to tell me, oh, we'll change the dose. We can lower the dose and all this kind of stuff. And I just looked at them. I said, no, I'm done. And I never touched it again. So, yes, I think that is a very important thing to do. We all, as young parents, we do need to be, forward thinking about that. And we do need to talk to our kids, especially our daughters, about, if they're going to be sexually active. Okay, well, what are you going to do? So.
I'm a professor at this higher board certification for medical doctors and nurse practitioners called A4M, and I teach in the gut module. And I gave massive data from the 1970s moving forward to the present, with studies with containing millions of participants in total, showing that if you have a genetic glitch and you take birth control pills, your risk of inflammatory bowel disease and gut wall damage skyrockets. And there were 100 medical docs in Chicago at the Marriott at the conference in December of 2017. None of them had ever heard of any of that information. So you often go to your doctor and you say, well, what do you think of blah, blah, blah? Or do you think I should do blah, blah, blah? Or I could take this. A lot of times they will give you an answer because they're paid to give you an answer. They're paid to always sound like they're right. And they want to, they care, but they often have answers that are wrong. And you wouldn't realize that. And it's human nature to be down on what you're not up on.
Yeah.
So you often will get the wrong answer. They won't even necessarily know this link. If they're handing out scripts for birth control, they're not going to say birth control is bad. They don't want to feel like they're doing something bad, and they probably don't know that literature.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm even doing this whole series, and you've brought out so many excellent points, is what's going to happen in the future. So all of this, we know all of this. The information is out there for everyone. So obviously, it's more of an individual choice. Like, we have to start with us and we have to start making these changes. But when is everybody else going to catch on?
We have a president who doesn't believe in any of this and is every day signing bills that's worsening your grandchildren's health. We have voted in a president that doesn't believe that the EPA should take into account adverse studies of new chemicals, new pesticides. We have a government that's promoting the demise of our civilization. What are we going to do? Well, first of all, you've got to vote in people who have some kind of environmental consciousness. How many here voted the way that with what we have now? We had 56 scientists in the EPA. We have 16 now. The EPA, which is designed to protect us, is paralyzed. So a lot of how you vote matters. You have to take a look at who you're voting for, their environmental stance. You can do a lot of things in your own world, but you can't live like the Seinfeldian comedic routine of a bubble boy, because we live in a dirty planet. So if there isn't some regulation and some worldwide negotiation, a lot of other countries are banning chemicals that we are not.
Yes.
You have to become politically active. You have to. I know that people don't like on my podcast that I am becoming politically active, but I see that the checks and balances we have set up to protect our health are losing. A study was published in Health Affairs about a month ago, and they were tracking how often do what country's kids die. And they published a study in Health Affairs looking at 20 westernized rich societies. So they compared us against 19 other wealthy westernized societies to see when do their infants die, when do the kids die, and when do the teenagers die. And we were at the bottom of the list. If you live in America, within the first year, you have a 76% higher risk of your child dying within the first year than any of those other 19 countries. Yet we spend 20% of our gross national product on healthcare. Our healthcare is not working to protect your children. Now, in the short term, if they have an infection and you do need an antibiotic because you don't have ozone available to you or IVs available to you, which we tend now to use acute interventions that aren't just antibiotics. At times, regular medicine is life-saving. And it's wonderful if you have a serious disease or you need a hip replacement or you need to go to the ER. There's wonderful things about our medicine. But in terms of prolonging your family's life, it sucks. And it's a cult which made you think you can't go outside of it. And now the environment is so ill, but doctors in practice aren't trained in nutrition and the environment. And that's a big part of what's going on. POTS disease is on the increase, a serious autonomic disease is on the increase in teenage girls that no one has even heard of before a few years ago.
Yeah.
So our children and our grandchildren and their fertility and their brain function, who ever heard of so much autism spectrum and behavioral issues and parenting issues? A lot of this is due to hormone altering chemicals. A lot of it, I could go on and on about it. But so that means you just have to do a few steps in your own life. You have to talk a little bit to your neighbors, because what they spray on their yard and in their house is going in on the bottom of your doggy paws and getting into your house on the bottom of your shoes. And you have to take a vote. You got to go out and vote for people who care about the air, the water, and health law to try and keep the planet safe. And I have never been a super politically oriented person, but if you're in environmental health science, you really have to be. And I'm sorry people are somewhat angry at me. I would hope they would be more supportive. The last few years of our hormone conferences, we brought in a lot of people with ideas for remediation. Okay, we've got all this bad stuff. How do we get it out of ourselves, out of our homes, and out of the planet? And there are some brilliant young scientists coming up with remediation ideas. We've cleaned up whole lakes. We pulled lead out of the air from gasoline. We can do, as a human race, so many fabulous things. We can undo a lot of this negative thing, but a lot of it comes down to regulatory environmental law. And that's going to depend on who you vote in. And if a whole entire party doesn't believe that air is important to the health of your grandkids, we are in deep trouble. And we are run by a Congress who doesn't believe in that. And I have to make a stance. I'm so glad to see young women now going into politics because they want to see gun laws. Like we just got a gun law today in Florida. Thank goodness. It's a beginning. But we want to have healthy children. They are our future. And we don't want to spend our family life and our family funds running after our ill children, hoping they'll get well. We have the most ill children in the United States. When my patients come from other countries, they can't believe our kids are on inhalers. They're popping this. We have ill children, that we have the first generation ever who is thought to live younger than the previous generation. Wow. So it starts with mothers. It starts with grassroots. It starts with you doing little differences, making a few little conversations with your neighbors, and then who you vote for. And then your kids are your biggest mirrors, and they see you have mindfulness of what you eat and how you live in your home to keep it as clean as you can. You can read my book, Hormone Deception, and get a bunch of steps in that, because there are things you can easily do. But then you also have to take some regulatory action, because there's, you can go organic, but if there's so much allowed to be sold as terrible seeds and non-organic, there's merging of water, there's merging of seeds, and you just can't keep things totally separate. The organic world versus the synthetic world, it's all one. So you have to become a little bit political and maybe vote for some women who care so much about their grandkids and the health of the planet. I don't know who those women will be, but I'm looking forward to them. And because we want our children to be well. And right now, America's at the bottom of the heap in proven published data. And so that means you can't keep doing everything like you've always done, because Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing everything like you've done before, going to the same authority figures, the same doctors, listening to the same whatever, thinking you're going to get new answers. So times have changed. And our planet's dirty and our home is dirty, and we can clean it up. And we can take steps, and we don't have, when my book first came out 20 years ago, almost nobody wanted to listen to it. And now it is really on the tongue and the consciousness and regulatory action of countries around the world that this is a major issue. And we can take action, but we also need to get laws passed that support the next so many generations and not paralyze its protection. I hope you don't mind that I've gone there in this talk, but I want our planet to be safe, and I want your family to be safe. And I don't want what happened to me. I couldn't have kids. I had multiple cancers. I had many doctors tell me I'd never be well. And I've remediated my physiology. I have the youth in my older age that I never could have in my younger age. So I know things can be turned around, but they can't by just doing things as we've always done them before. So it's great when you have summits like this where you tell people it's time to make some changes. They don't have to be earth-shattering, but you need to be mindful and aware to know you need to make them, and then what do you need to do, and they need to be in your own life, and then a little bit in the life of your city and government.
And then another thing is, we as people, we can write to Congress. We can write our congressmen. So,
Or pick up the phone and call them. If you don't want to write, just pick up the phone and call them and say, I'm really upset. My kids are unprotected here. They're talking about radiating food now and doing so many things to our food supply that are all making money for the companies that would do this. And what you have as a child that has to go to the doctor more and more and more, can't think the way a child should be able to think and focus and learn. It comes down to our kids. And I want to see us, I really had a very unhealthy childhood getting so many other people well. And now in my older age, I'm healthier than people 20 years younger than me. So I know that you can turn things around, but you need to know what needs to be turned around and start with a few baby steps and just be aware when elections come to take some kind of a stance with your vote. It matters.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Berkson.
I used to be someone who I hated to even think about politics, but once you're in the environment, you got to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I am not a fan of exactly what is going on in our environment, and I don't think, obviously, I don't blame it all on the current president, on President Trump, because I guess I look back and I think, well, it all really started in the Industrial Revolution. That's when everything really started to go south. We started pouring all that stuff in, and nobody, I really feel up until this point, has actually, what needs to happen is somebody needs to have the gall to say enough is enough to these big companies.
It doesn't have, see what happened when I was at Tulane, Gore tried to raise, at that point it sounded like a lot. Now it sounds like a ridiculous small amount, but he tried to raise $5 million to test a whole slew of chemicals that come out to see if they're endocrine disrupting. And all of the industry poo-pooed that there was even a problem. Because it was, so the field of endocrine disruption just got developed. Those were all the guys that I worked with at Tulane in the late 1990s. So nobody really knew about it. And the chemical companies denied it like they still deny it today, like the bisphenol A companies deny it today.
Yeah.
But now other countries all around the world are saying this is the third major issue to health problems. So, but we really do need to have, we have tried to do that before, but government can say we're not going to test it because the companies have the legal right. And then what happens is your child can be very ill. Just like the idea that your child can't go to school if they don't have almost 200 different vaccinations now. They're not going to be allowed to go to school. Now that's really, there's some vaccinations that are life-saving. But you got to call a spade a spade. That's a money-making industry that's putting your child and their undeveloped immune system at risk. Probably if I were a young mother today and could have kids, I'd have to homeschool my children, to protect them from all of that, So as a parent today, you have so many issues on your shoulders. Just so many issues that nobody has all the answers for, but you can take in each realm 5 steps, just 5 steps in each realm. Like with endocrine disrupting, you can get a filter on your shower or a whole filter on your home. You can get water, whole house filters, and put UV light in your ducts. You could take your shoes off at the front door so you don't put things into your home. And you can never, ever use plastic in the dishwasher and then use it for food or beverages, and get rid of plastic in your house. Get everything in glass, and never microwave in plastic. If you microwave any food in plastic or any tray, those trays in lean cuisines, all that stuff, they all release plastics that are hormone altering chemicals into your food. So those 5 steps right there would make your personal life much more protective for your family. Much more protective. And then you could take a look to see who you really like that has some environmental consciousness, just some environmental consciousness when you vote. Doesn't matter what party they're for, but that they just say that they care about the environment and the future generations. That would be huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Just for that person right there.
Yeah, for this little guy. Okay, thank you. Go rinse your hands, okay? You want to come and say hi?
Do you want to say hi? Want to say hi?
Come say hi to Dr. Berkson.
Let's see.
My crazy little guy.
What's his name?
What's your name? Say Christian.
Kristen.
Oh, what a beautiful name. Hi, Christian. Have you been listening to us talking?
Yes.
And now he woke his sister.
See, it's all about these kids. It's about these kids
Yeah.
and their health, and they should be allowed to be healthy so that they can focus on their life and not have to focus on their illness. And that focus has been changed in most American children today.
Yeah.
That's why I care so passionately about this.
Well, I loved our interview, and you really brought out a lot of stuff. And you know, it's not everybody has their own. Thank you. Everybody has their own. You know, obviously their own political thinking and whatnot. But I do think that that is certainly something that is important, and we do need to really start seriously thinking about that for the future generations. So, you know, I appreciate you know you going there and touching on that. So, but any last words that you might have for the audience?
If they would like to dive deeper, I have a radio show called Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio, and I have a lot of different people come on, talk about what they've learned to help with health. Just really agile thinkers. For example, I had Jill Carnahan on, who when she was in med school got severe breast cancer, and then from the treatment got severe inflammatory bowel disease and was told she would never be well. And now she's cured herself completely of inflammatory bowel disease and cancer. And now that's what she specializes in her practice. And she has all kinds of answers for people, which come down to many of the things that we've been talking about on the show today. And I also have a blog called Berkson's Blog. And you can go to my website, drlindseyberkson.com, DrLindseyBerkson. And you can sign up for my mailing list, and I send out different newsletters about free summits or about courses that I'm offering or free classes. For example, over Christmas time, I gave 5 or 6 hours of free classes on how to keep your breasts healthy. And I gave it just as a Christmas gift to everybody. So if you sign up on my list, I let you know when I'm giving gifts, and I also let you know when I'm selling some things, you know, whatever you might want, like a new book. I have a new cookbook coming down the road that I'm putting out with a nutritional PhD program. And I have a gut textbook coming out that's about 850 pages that I'm close to finishing up. And it's nice to know when these things are coming out, if you're interested in them or if you have a practitioner that might be interested in them.
Yeah.
And I do consult now a small amount with very complex cases, specializing in breast cancer and inflammatory bowel disease, or people who just can't get well. I often work together with you and your own provider all over the world. We do it by phone, or if it's outside of the country, by Skype. And we spend a few hours on the initial intake and write-up to try and really find out why you're not getting well and how we might help. So if you're interested in a consult, you can take a look at my consult section at my website. So
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing this wonderful information for everybody. So,
and look at how beautiful your children are. That's great. That's what we want. We want to keep our children healthy and beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for holding summits like this where women can have access to how different people think, and you can hold on to whatever sounded good to you. You could let go of what you didn't like, and you can decide to use some of the positives for some good change if they felt right.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And we wish you well, we wish you health, and have a great day.
Bye.